pleasure to welcome you to the Arts and Sciences Lecture, the spring edition, and I thank you all for being here. I'll invite you at this time to silence your cell phones, and I know there are a lot of students here for courses, and we ask that you stick around for the questions and so forth, and not leave while Professor McLaughlin is still speaking. I was a stupid one. Being chosen by one's peers to be the Arts and Sciences Lecturer is the highest honor that the College of Arts and Sciences bestows upon one of its faculty. The peer-determined award that recognizes the significant national and international reputation of a scholar and teacher in the college, and is bestowed upon a faculty member only once in his or her career. The series was established in 1968 as a means of honoring scholars within the college, and it celebrates the crucial academic work of faculty involved in expanding the knowledge bases of their disciplines. In addition, the series is one way the college fulfills its social responsibility to interact with a larger intellectual community within which we publicly engage in the intellectual activities that we so value. This evening, Robert L. McLaughlin, Professor of English, will continue the tradition of the Arts and Sciences Lecture. Before I invite Dr. Christopher DeSantis, the Chair of the Department of English, to come to the lecture and introduce Professor McLaughlin, I do want to acknowledge that our new provost, Professor Janet Krejci, was able to join us tonight. She has multiple obligations in any evening, and we appreciate very much for being here and supporting every aspect of the intellectual life of the university. Thank you, Provost Krejci, for being here. Now it's my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Christopher DeSantis.
Thank you. Dean Simpson, Provost Krejci, Dean Perry, Dean Blaney, colleagues, friends, students, alumni. Surely one of the greatest honors of serving as chair of the Department of English at ISU is the privilege of introducing a professor such as Dr. Robert McLaughlin, whose talents as a scholar and teacher are among the reasons our department is so outstanding. I have admired Professor McLaughlin's contributions to his discipline and commitment to his students and colleagues since I arrived on campus in 1999. As one of the premier scholars of contemporary American literature, the popular culture of World War II, and the musical theater of Stephen Sondheim, as faculty advisor to our chapter of Sigma Tau Delta, International English Honor Society, as the English Department's honors coordinator, and as a mentor to countless undergraduate and graduate students, Professor McLaughlin's status as a teacher-scholar is certainly distinguished. His generosity of time and intellect to his students and colleagues, legendary. Indeed, he's the kind of professor that initially inspired me to get into the racket of higher education. Among his numerous publications, Professor McLaughlin's book, Will Always Have the Movies, American Cinema During World War II, which he co-authored with Professor Sally Perry, established him as one of the leading experts on popular culture in World War II. The book was widely and positively reviewed across disciplines and even managed the difficult task of appealing to both academic and popular audiences. A reviewer from Publishers Weekly, for example, praised McLaughlin and Perry's scholarly rigor, but also applauded them for never forgetting the view from the peanut gallery, or the history and movie buffs among them. In addition to the groundbreaking book, We'll Always Have the Movies, Professor McLaughlin is currently writing a book-length follow-up study on World War II drama, and he recently completed work on his new book, So Many Possibilities, Stephen Sondheim and the American Musical Theater, which is forthcoming from University Press of Mississippi, a leading press for scholarly studies of popular culture. Not only productive in scholarship on film, drama, and musicals, Professor McLaughlin has also established an international reputation as a scholar of contemporary American literature and, more broadly, postmodernist fiction. He's published dozens of peer-reviewed journal articles and book chapters, and his contributions to contemporary American fiction, particularly experimental fiction, have also been extended by his previous editorial work as senior editor for the Review of Contemporary Fiction, as well as series editor for the Dalkey Archive Press online casebooks on modern and contemporary literature. His work has been widely recognized by other prominent scholars in the field. Thomas Schaub, for example, the Gene Wall Bennett Professor of English at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, wrote that Robert McLaughlin may know more about contemporary fiction and the contemporary fiction scene than anyone working today in an academic position. David Cowart, the Lewis Bryce Scudder Professor of English at the University of South Carolina, notes that Professor McLaughlin writes with extraordinary sensitivity about numerous writers making early or relatively early appearances on the academic radar screen. And he adds, it takes a special kind of confidence to be among the first to pronounce on the new, or for that matter, to wade into the already vexed discussion of this or that well-known contemporary. In addition to his outstanding work as a scholar, Professor McLaughlin has a long and distinguished record of excellence in the teaching and mentoring of undergraduate and graduate students at ISU. This excellence has been recognized in many ways, including the College of Arts and Sciences Outstanding Teaching Award in the Humanities, the Stan and Sandy Reeves Award for Excellence in Undergraduate Education, and the Outstanding University Teacher Award. Professor McLaughlin also stands out for his commitment to academic citizenship, serving in roles that have deeply enriched undergraduate and graduate education at ISU. He served as co-advisor of the Sigma Tau Delta Honor Society for over 20 years, and as co-advisor of the English Studies Association for 14 years, building these organizations into strong student groups that contribute to the popularity of the English major and the recruitment and retention of students. He served as our Director of Undergraduate Studies, as Associate Chair, and most recently as our Honors Program Coordinator. He's a constant presence in Stevenson Hall, maintaining a rigorous research agenda and constantly innovating in the classroom, even while remaining incredibly available to his students and colleagues. He offers a generosity of time, intellect, and spirit that is truly rare and truly exceptional. For his many accomplishments and sheer dedication as a scholar and teacher, Professor Robert McLaughlin is a faculty member of whom we in the Department of English are particularly proud. I consider it a true honor and privilege to introduce such an outstanding colleague tonight as the College of Arts and Sciences' newest distinguished lecturer. Please join me in welcoming to the podium Professor Robert McLaughlin.
Am I on? Thank you, Dr. DeSantis. That was really generous. Thank you very much. And thank you, Gene Simpson and the College of Arts and Sciences for awarding me this honor, which is really, really humbling. And thank all of you for coming out to hear this. It's a little disorienting to see people that I'm normally used to seeing in different kinds of contexts all together in one place, but it's also very, very nice, and I'm quite grateful. I want to give a special thank you to my oldest friend, Joe Mandola. That sounds insulting. So my friend of longest standing, who made the trip down here for this. I think so. Joe, are you here? Yay! When we were in 7th or 8th grade, Joe's mother took him and me to see the National Touring Company of the musical 1776. And it hooked me on musicals, and it started the journey that led up to this project and why I'm here tonight. So it's really appropriate that he's here tonight. I'm very touched. Thank you. I also wanted to mention my sister-in-law, Roberta Perry, who was planning to come here tonight and ended up not being able to, but she's been responsible for me being able to attend some really special Stephen Sondheim events, which I know that sounds nerdy, but that's what I really live for. I'm very grateful to her, and I want to give her a long-distance thank you. I also have some people who have worked very hard to make this night possible. Chad Kervin, who's sitting over there on the piano, and Colleen Longo, who's sitting up front. We'll be hearing from her later. Laura Curry, who's up front here and did the visual design that you'll be enjoying. All of these people have made sure that even if what I have to say ends up boring you, there should be parts of the evening that will be entertaining. So that's very good. Finally, I have to thank Sally Perry. The very first conversation that Sally and I ever had was about Stephen Sondheim. And we've had a lot of conversations about Stephen Sondheim. Sally is always supportive. She's always patient. Believe me, she has to put up with a lot. And she always inspires the best part of everything I do. So, thank you, Sally. I'm going to get a drink of water, and then we'll be ready to go. It's December 4th, 1928. It's a bit cold, but you don't care, because you have tickets to producer Florence Ziegfeld's latest musical comedy extravaganza, Whoopee. You've made your way to the New Amsterdam Theater on the corner of Broadway and 42nd Street, the heart of Times Square. You're excited and curious to see what Ziegfeld, composer Walter Donaldson, lyricist Gus Kahn, and librettist William Anthony Maguire have come up with. You believe in arriving fashionably late, so you've missed the overture and the ensemble's opening number, It's a Beautiful Day Today. You've also missed the specialty dance by Olive Brady, and Here's to the Girl with My Heart, the number for the Cowboys. You know this as you hustle down the aisle that the setting is at Dude Ranch. You're sitting in your seat as the juvenile and ingenue sing their love duet, I'm Bringing a Red, Red Rose. But your attention is on the stage for the entrance of star Eddie Cantor. The entrance applause covers Cantor's move to stage center, where he's surrounded by several chorus girls whose function is to look beautiful, and where he introduces the song that will become his signature piece. Every time I hear that march from Lohengrin, I am always on the outside looking in. Maybe that is why I see the funny side when I see a fallen brother take a bride. Weddings make a lot of people sad, but if you're not the groom, they're not so bad. Another cry, another June, another sunny honeymoon, another season, another reason for making whoopee. A lot of shoes, a lot of rice. The groom is nervous, he answers twice. It's really killing that he's so willing to make
charge. What if I fail? The judge says, oh, it's right into jail. You better keep her. I think it's cheaper than making whoopee.
Back to Whoopi in a moment. First, let's think about what exactly a musical comedy is. Traditionally, the musical theater combines in various proportions the elements of song, dance, comedy, and spectacle. What it does not always have is narrative. What we think of as the Broadway musical comedy began to form when aspects of the revue, especially popular-based Tin Pan Alley-style music and ragtime and jazz-inspired dance, combined with the narrative elements of European-style operetta. Something of a plot and something approaching continuing characters would be offered, if not as a dramatic arc, then as a sort of a narrative clothesline on which the songs, dances, and comic routines could be hung. Musical theater historian Larry Stemple defines the musical comedy as, quote, a revue in which the right running order is governed by a plot. But we need to note an important paradox. At the same time that the narrative provides a structure for the show, it is also completely malleable, twisting, turning, pausing, or even being altogether suspended so that songs, dances, or comedy can take center stage. As longtime reviewer Walter Kerr noted, quote, the essential purpose of the musical comedy book was to be interrupted. Its very quality lay in its interruptibility. It wasn't supposed to do things. It was supposed to get out of the way of other things. Aesthetically, narrative is both central and irrelevant. Whoopi is an excellent example. The play's plot involves a young woman in love with a man who is thought to be half Indian. Being forced into a marriage with the unsavory sheriff, she stages a mock elopement with Henry Williams, the Eddie Cantor part, a hypochondriac who has come out west for his health. A series of chases and escapes ensues until it turns out that the young man is not part Indian after all, and he and his love can marry. Much of what happens on stage happily detours from the narrative arc and the characters. Cantor's opening song, Makin' Whoopi, is, as we heard, a knowing and cynical look at marriage, hardly appropriate to the girl-shy Henry. Later, Henry hides in a stove, which explodes, covering him in soot, so Cantor has an excuse to perform a blackface scene, including a medley of his hits by other songwriters. Even less plot-connected was the use put to supporting actress Ruth Etting. According to theater historian Gerald Wardman, quote, she played a movie star called Leslie Dawes. The role had no function in the plot. As often as not, she merely came on stage to sing a song without the smallest lead-in, then walked off. Further, for producer Ziegfeld, no show was complete without a bevy of beautiful girls and spectacle, famously provided here by showgirls dressed as Indians riding real horses. The narrative, then, is the organizing aesthetic by which the elements of musical comedy are introduced and structured, but, oddly, the narrative itself has no integrity. It can be modified by the creators to suit a star turn, the inclusion of a song or joke, or a chorus line of fabulously and scantily clad young women. Speaking of narrative detours, I need to take some time to introduce the concept of postmodernism. A slippery term about which there is no clear consensus. In the broadest sense, postmodernism is marked by an awareness, perhaps a hyper-awareness, of the ways in which language mediates our experience of the world. Our experience of ourselves, others, our social environment, our history, everything we consider reality is constructed and known through language, discourse, or narrative. If we accept this idea, several corollaries follow. One concerns self-referentiality, perhaps the most seminal characteristic of postmodern art. Self-referentiality is a direct challenge to the premise of realism, the suspension of disbelief that allows us, while watching the play, to forget that we are in a theater and that the people on stage are actors, and to imagine that we are actually watching scenes from the characters' lives. Put differently, Realism as a style and a practice seeks to render invisible the process of representation by which the world is turned into art. The postmodern seeks to make the process of representation not invisible, but translucent, so that the viewer is conscious of the art as art, and of the difficulty of capturing through representation any experience of the world. Thus, postmodernism is about art pointing to itself, pointing to the world. World understood here not as an objectively knowable essence, but as a construction of language, discourse, and narrative. A second, connected corollary is intertextuality. Romanticism has bequeathed us an image of the artist as lonely genius, transforming her unique experiences of the world into personally rendered, yet universally meaningful art. However, postmodernism challenges the idea of anyone's unique experience of the world. Since we can know them only through the shared language of our culture, our experiences are more communal than unique. Similarly, the language of our culture, our experiences, Similarly, the language, discourses, and narratives and conventions artists use to create their art are inherited, not conjured out of nothing. Any expression of the artist's experience of the world in art is automatically articulated through several layers of discourse, and so is expressed in and seen, read, or heard through the noise of competing ongoing cultural conversations. Intertextuality, then, is the concept that when we speak, write, express ourselves, we do so over, through, and amid the already spoken, the already written, the already expressed. A third corollary concerns identity and performance. Postmodernism challenges the concept of the autonomous individual. Instead, identity is constructed through the layers of discourses available in our culture to think and talk about ourselves. That is, our culture offers discourses complete with vocabulary, implied narratives, and assumptions about behavior, appearance, and being, on the various factors that combine to give us a sense of identity. Such factors as gender, sexuality, class, race, ethnicity, religion, profession, and on and on. By articulating membership in any of these factors, we are immersed in the ideologically charged discourses connected with them. Ideologically charged because different claims to identity position one differently amid the power relations of one's society. Part of this immersion in discourse takes the form of learning how to perform one's identity. We learn our culture's discourses concerning, for example, gender, and we simultaneously learn the expectations for gender behavior, appearance, and attitudes. So we learn to perform our gendered role. These performances are generally unconscious. We come to think of them as natural. These performances, however, can become self-conscious, performative. When one performs with the awareness that it is a performance, she brings an aspect of identity construction that is usually unconscious into the foreground for examination. Performativity seeks to make its spectators aware of what they are seeing as performance and of the performances in their own sense of self. So what does all this have to do with musical theater? I contend that looking at the musical theater through the lens of postmodern theory can help us understand the musical, especially the musical of the last 40 years, in a new way. But first, if we think of the musical comedy aesthetic I have described in terms of these postmodern concepts, we can see that these concepts are present in a seminal, if simple way. Musical comedy is self-referential. There's no attempt to build a fourth wall between audience and play. The fact that the narrative is interrupted frequently for songs and dances, many of them unmotivated by or disconnected from the plot, suggests that the shows are aware of themselves as shows. And the fact that audiences generally acknowledge these numbers with applause suggests that audiences are aware of themselves as spectators. Further, the lack of seriousness, the very disregard with which the play addresses its own plot, encourages the audience likewise to dismiss any potential connections between the narrative and anything outside of the theater. Musical comedy is intertextual. Music never functions in a vacuum. Rather, listeners recognize elements of the music they hear and connect it to other music they have heard. Musical comedy conventions are themselves intertextual, in that an audience familiar enough with musicals will recognize and develop expectations based on the way the conventions are usually employed. In a 1970 interview, Richard Rodgers pointed toward the intertextual nature of the musical comedy and connected it to the conventions audiences had come to expect. Quote, "You had an opening chorus, then sometimes called an icebreaker. This was obligatory. Then you had a number between the soubrette, in those days she was called the second girl, and the young comedian called the funny boy, not the top banana. Then you had your first sentimental song, or romantic ballad between the ingenue and the leading man. It was a 1, 2, 3, 4 order, and you didn't break that sequence, because if it had been successful once before, it was assumed it would be again. Shows were put on along an iron-bound formula. Or, as musical theater historian Ethan Morden puts it, quote, musical plays generally differ from one another. It's musical comedy that has to learn new ways of doing the same things again and again. Musical comedy is performative. One might argue that theater always involves creators, actors, and audiences self-consciously aware of performance. Theater historian Paul Woodruff states, quote, theater is the art by which human beings make or find human action worth watching. However, in the musical comedy, the self-consciousness of performance and spectating goes much farther. Because there is no pretense of realism, of a fourth wall between actors and audience, because character functions primarily as a name that tenuously links actor to narrative, and because the success of the show's entertainment depends on the ability of the performers to put the songs, dances, and comedy over, musical comedy actors did not lose themselves in their characters, nor did audiences lose sight of the performers. As musical theater historian Bruce Curley puts it, quote, in the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s, musical theater actors did not inhabit their roles, they performed them. It's March 31st, 1943. This is one of those dates that divide history into before and after, but you don't know that yet. Trying to protect yourself from the sleet, you're walking down West 44th Street, almost all the way to 8th Avenue, to the St. James Theater, where once again you have opening night tickets. You're not sure what to expect from this new musical. The Theater Guild, which is producing, has had several rocky years. The composer, Richard Rodgers, has a solid track record, but all his previous shows were written with Lawrence Hart, the only partner he's ever worked with. His new lyricist and librettist, Oscar Hammerstein II, did some exciting work in the 1920s, but he hasn't had a hit in over a decade. The word from the out-of-town tryout isn't good either. After seeing it in New Haven, one theater world wag quipped, quote, no legs, no jokes, no chance. They even changed the title before it came to New York, as if they're trying to sneak it into town. What was Away We Go is now being called Oklahoma. It's no longer fashionable to arrive late, so you're in your seat in time for what you have to admit is a pretty rousing overture. And then the curtain rises, and you're confused. Where's the up-tempo music? Where are the chorus girls? Instead, all you can see is a set representing a farm, and a stage empty except for an old woman churning butter. Then you hear a baritone voice from off stage, and star Alfred Drake, playing the cowboy Curly, makes his entrance.
There's a bright golden haze on the meadow. There's a bright golden haze on the meadow. The corn is as high as an elephant's eye, and looks like it's climbing clear up to the sky. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way. All the cattle are standing like statues. All the cattle are standing like statues. They don't turn their heads as they see me ride by. But a little brown maverick is winking her eye. Oh, what a beautiful morning.
most startled theatergoers when Oklahoma opened was the way it defied musical comedy conventions, the iron-bound formula Rogers spoke of. Oklahoma and the remarkable series of musicals with which Rodgers and Hammerstein followed it up perfected what came to be known as the integrated musical, in which there must be a dramatic, narrative, or character-driven reason to motivate every element of the play. In the integrated musical, characters sing when song becomes the most effective way to tell the story. Dance contributes to the telling of the story or the development of character. Humor comes from the characters and the situation, not from gags. Performers enter into the characters they are playing and stay there until the curtain call. In the musical comedy era, a star was essentially irreplaceable. When Rodgers and Hammerstein auditioned John Great as a replacement for Alfred Drake, the concern was whether he could perform the role as written, and Great used to joke whether he could fit into Drake's costumes. The practice of the integrated musical implies three theoretical premises, which taken together make up the Rodgers and Hammerstein aesthetic. First, this aesthetic demands a new attitude towards narrative. Where in the musical comedy, narrative was central but also malleable, in the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical play, narrative is the organizing principle that structures the whole. When writers and composers ask if a scene, a song, or a dance works, the answer is to look at whether or not it helps to tell the story, advance the plot, reveal character, explore a theme. A second theoretical premise centers on the songs in a musical play. In the Rodgers and Hammerstein aesthetic, songs function dramatically. We can understand this function in three ways. First, songs are introduced in particular dramatic moments for particular dramatic purposes, and they are written for specific characters to sing at these moments. Hammerstein put it this way, quote, "There are few things in life of which I am certain, but I am sure of this one thing, that the song is the servant of the play, that it is wrong to write first what you think is an attractive song, and then try to wedge it into a story." Second, songs help propel the story. Something must happen during the song. The dramatic situation at the end must be different from what it was at the beginning. In an interview, Stephen Sondheim explains, quote, "I was essentially trained by Oscar Hammerstein to think of songs as one-act plays, to move a song from point A to point B dramatically. I think of songs in sonata form, statement, development, and recapitulation, but in Oscar's terms, it was first act, second act, third act. The character singing goes through a development process and comes out with a conclusion emotionally different from where he began, so the song has a sense of moving the story forward, even though it may not move the plot forward. Oscar's attempt was never to have a song that merely stated one idea over and over again." A third way songs function dramatically is in the music itself. Burton Lane, whose career as a composer spanned the musical comedy and Rodgers and Hammerstein eras, noted, quote, "When books started to have more meaning and take on more weight, the scores became better because the books demanded better music." At their best, songs in the musical plays make use of the elements of music, tension and resolution, repetition and variation, to help define and develop the drama. This goes beyond the music setting the mood to the music working with or against the lyrics to accomplish the song's dramatic purpose. The final theoretical premise in the Rodgers and Hammerstein aesthetic is a broad one, and one that marks the most significant break from the musical comedy aesthetic. The integrated musical brings something that had never been an element of musical comedy: realism. Rodgers and Hammerstein, in effect, built a fourth wall between the actors and the audience. At its most perfect, a Rodgers and Hammerstein-style musical play makes music and dance arise from the dialogue so appropriately that the audience is not subject to the self-referential nudge they are while watching musical comedies as performer separates from character. At its most perfect, the Rodgers and Hammerstein-style musical play absorbs the audience into the reality of its characters and their dramatic situation, affecting the suspension of disbelief that even the introduction of song and dance cannot dispel. This does not mean that all the aspects of the musical comedy aesthetic we discussed earlier disappear, but that, because of the suspension of disbelief, the audience recognizes them, but holds them apart in their minds while they lose themselves in the artificial reality of the play. Larry Stempel writes, quote, "The songs in Oklahoma were performed representationally. They intensified thought or speech without really being songs at all. Only audiences eavesdropping on the characters through the proverbial fourth wall experienced the songs as the musical numbers they actually were. The result, then, of the Rodgers and Hammerstein Revolution was a musical theater that took itself more seriously as art, that was more capable of addressing serious themes in a serious manner, and that repressed the proto-postmodern characteristics that had been central to the form for most of the century. Of course, the new does not say new forever. As usually happens, a form that at its outset defied conventions and opened up possibilities for the new becomes with time conventional itself, thus limiting the possibilities for what can be done. As early as the mid-1950s, but more obviously in the 1960s, there were signs that the Rodgers and Hammerstein style musical was nearing exhaustion. One sign was the forward-looking musicals that began experimenting with new directions and that began to rediscover and reinvent aspects of the musical comedy aesthetic. Man of La Mancha, Cabaret, and Hair, for example. In different ways, de-emphasized realism and reintroduced self-referentiality, performativity, and a diminished reliance on plot. The primary creative figure in exploring this new kind of musical is Stephen Sondheim, whose career bridges the Rodgers and Hammerstein era and the postmodern musical of the last part of the 20th century. Sondheim, who celebrated his 85th birthday 2 days ago, was an unhappy teenager, the product of a broken home, but found a substitute father in his Doylestown, Pennsylvania neighbor, Oscar Hammerstein. Hammerstein famously tutored young Sondheim in the craft of musical theater and mentored his career until his death in 1960. By that time, Sondheim had written lyrics for 2 Broadway musicals, West Side Story and Gypsy, which, along with My Fair Lady and Fiddler on the Roof, marked the apotheosis of the Rodgers and Hammerstein style musical, stretching the form about as far as it would go. In the 1960s, Sondheim had staged the first 2 musicals for which he wrote music and lyrics. The successful A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, and the 9-performance flop Anyone Can Whistle. In 1965, he wrote lyrics only for an unhappy collaboration with Richard Rodgers, Do I Hear a Waltz? But in 1970, he returned pretty much permanently to writing music and lyrics and began a remarkable 11-year collaboration with director-producer Harold Prince. In just over a decade, they and their collaborators created 6 musicals that both changed our sense of what a musical can be and set a bar for quality that few have subsequently matched. The musicals were Company, Follies, A Little Night Music, Pacific Overtures, Sweeney Todd, The Demon Barber of Fleet Street, and Merrily We Roll Along. What's significant about these musicals? First, the range of subjects and styles, from contemporary New York to turn-of-the-century Sweden to 19th century Japan. From marriage and relationships to U.S. show business history to the clash of Eastern and Western cultures to revenge played out with a razor. From the plotless to happy endings to a plot that goes chronologically backward. Second, as the foregoing suggests, these plays refuse to be limited by the audience's expectations for the genre. Third, Sondheim's music brings a level of sophistication to the telling of the story and the exploration of character seen only rarely in earlier decades. And his lyrics not only represent an unprecedented precision and virtuosity, but also offer actors deep levels of subtext to play. But for my purposes, what's interesting about the Sondheim-Prince musicals of the 1970s is the way they are in conversation with the elements of postmodernism, which by this time were evident in all the arts. This conversation is manifested in several ways, most notably a decentering of narrative, including dramatological narrative, the personal narrative of the life story, national narratives, and historical narratives. A questioning of identity, especially the notion of an autonomous, self-defining individual. A recognition of the power and limits of language, its power to construct our reality, and its limits in seeking to represent a reality outside of language. To do these things, the Sondheim-Prince musicals set aside Rodgers and Hammerstein's realist aesthetic and returned to and repurposed many of the characteristics of the old musical comedy. As an example, I'd like to look first at Company. Company opened on April 26, 1970 at the Alden Theater on west of 52nd Street. The libretto is by George Firth, hitherto an actor, who had written a play made up of several skits about married life. Producer-director Harold Prince suggested using the skits as scenes in a musical that would focus not on the characters per se, but on the themes of marriage and relationships. Sondheim, who was in career doldrums at the time, was recruited to write the score, and the result was a plotless musical about Robert, a 35-year-old Manhattan bachelor, observing his friends, 5 married couples, and sparring with his 3 on-again, off-again girlfriends. Rather than focusing on Robert's narrative journey, the play offers a series of scenes and musical numbers in apparently random order, all exploring the possibility for human relationships in the contemporary urban world, and by the way, challenging narrative as a meaning-providing structure. Many of the numbers are delivered by characters observing other characters in a scene, commenting on the action, and breaking the fourth wall. As Sondheim has reflected, quote, all the songs in Company are either self-encapsulated entities or Brechtian commentaries on what is happening. In the score of Company, nothing comes out of the play. Nothing. It's absolutely the reverse of what Oscar taught me. What then provides the structure for the play? The authors employ several cyclically repeated devices. The most important of these is Robert's 35th birthday surprise party, which occurs at the opening of the play, the end of Act 1, the opening of Act 2, and the end of the play. While this particular moment is repeated 4 times, each time it is presented differently, different dialogue, and different songs. These variations liberate the birthday party, and by extension the play as a whole, from the tyranny of time. The birthday party scene suggests that each moment is a launching pad for multiple possibilities, all of which can exist simultaneously, with no one of them clearly the true one. Company's structural experiments create a tension that contributes to the play's main thematic conflict, the world of the busy signal versus the world of relationships. The world of the busy signal is one of constant activity. Robert neatly sums this up when discussing his apartment with a girlfriend, quote, I've always liked my apartment, but I'm never really in it. I just seem to pass through the living room on my way to the bedroom to go to the bathroom to get ready to go out again. Robert's time is filled with unending activity, activity that is, like the play's structure, cyclical, repeated with variations, but without moving forward in a narrative sense. The play goes on to expand the world of the busy signal from the specifics of Robert's life to the broader canvas of New York City. It does this mainly in a song sung by Martha, one of Robert's girlfriends, as she observes Robert in conversation with his other girlfriends, another 100 people. This song was originally sung by Pamela Myers. Tonight, it's sung by Colleen Mongo.
Another 100 people just got off of a train and came up through the ground, while another 100 people just got off of a bus and are looking around at another 100 people who got off of a plane and are looking at us who got off of a train and a plane and a bus maybe yesterday. It's a city of strangers, some come to work, some to play. City of strangers, some come to stare, some to stay. And every day, the ones who stay can find each other in the crowded streets and the garden parks, by the rusty fountains and the dusty trees with the battered barks. And they walk together past the postered walls with the crude remarks. And they meet at parties through the friends of friends who they never know. Will you pick me up or should I meet you there? Shall we let it go? Did you get my message? 'Cause I looked in vain. Can we see each other Tuesday if it doesn't rain? Look, I'll call you in the morning or my service will explain. And another 100 people just got off of a train.
Isn't that a great song? There's a wonderful Sondheim parody based on that called Another 100 Words Just Came Rushing Out of My Mouth. The world of the busy signal offers crowds, parties, dates, but in it, personal connection does not seem possible. As the busy signal suggests, chances for communication on which a relationship depends constantly fail. Robert is open to anything, any action, any experience, any pleasure. As he says at the beginning of the play in response to the many messages on his answering machine, quote, "Whatever you're calling about, my answer is yes." Set up in conflict with the world of the busy signal is the world of relationships and marriage. This world is in many ways a response to the busy signal. It seeks a point in the pointlessness, a goal to aim for, marriage, that promises completion and an identity made possible through relation to another person. Marriage is the happily ever after, the end point that resolves narrative complications. This marriage narrative, linked as it is to the one-way flow of time, is not reversible and repeatable, as the cycle of the busy signal is. Identity implies a life story, which in turn implies a life lived in time. It is within this structural and thematic tension that Robert exists, thoroughly at home in the world of the busy signal, yet pressured by his friends and social convention to enter the world of relationships and marriage. The play suggests that Robert has a lifestyle more than a life. Robert lives pleasurably, maybe hedonistically, ceaselessly active, yet he lives superficially. His relations with couples and girlfriends seem less emotionally meaningful than they do potentially awkward social situations he is perpetually trying to negotiate. He speaks in cliches and apparently rehearsed speeches. On the morning after his night with one girlfriend, he plays a scene about his wanting her to stay with him and then is horrified when she takes him seriously. For a man devoted to a life of pleasure, he seems to lack any real feelings. He is all performance. Mock sincere, mock in love, mock friend. Through most of the play, Robert even pretends to have a goal for his life and to desire completion. In Someone Is Waiting, he imagines just the right woman waiting for him, a woman who is a combination of everything he finds attractive in the wives. A problem with such an impossible combination as a goal is that this someone is a fantasy. No one Robert knows or is likely to find in the real world. To set as one's goal an impossible misright is to avoid having a goal at all. In his final song, Being Alive, Robert comes to a subtler, less definite, but more mature conclusion about commitment and relationships. The motivation for Robert singing this song is one of the wives, Joanne, propositioning him. As Joanne stares him down, Robert tries all his usual tricks for avoiding intimacy. In a rambling, semi-drunken speech, he tries mock sincere and rehearsed conversation. He skims over possible conversational topics, and when Joanne propositions him, he tries to dismiss her with a joke. When none of these strategies dissuades her, when he can find no escape from the spotlight she has put him in, he asks two revealing questions. Who will I take care of? And, speaking of relationships, what do you get? The latter question indicates a desire for a goal, a point, a forward-moving narrative that up until now he has resisted. The former question indicates a desire for a life story that can contain another's story. Together, the questions motivate the exploration he conducts in Being Alive. Robert again addresses an unspecified and presumably unknown person, a somebody. But here, that somebody isn't a straw woman that supports his own indecision and avoidance. Here, she is a necessary element to his ability to live, to have a life story, to have meaning for his life. Here, Robert realizes that the meaning a relationship with another person can offer isn't in the finishing of a story with its happily ever after. Rather, the meaning comes from the ability of a relationship with another person to force him to go beyond skimming life's surface and to make him experience life in its details, its trivia, its richness. Robert's final realization is that the meaning of a life comes not from the end point, but from being immersed in the process of living. Life is frightening because it is unfinished, in process. Its meaning isn't clear to us because it isn't completed. Its meaning must be found in the depth of the everyday and the indeterminacy of the now. Robert ends by anticipating that an intimate relationship with another person, the kind of relationship he has so far avoided, can help him discover this kind of meaning. Finally immersed in time, Robert understands that the both and of marriage is the enfolding of another's in-process narrative into his own. The Sondheim-Prince collaboration didn't have a happy ending. After the tremendous success of Sweeney Todd in 1979, 1981's Merrily We Roll Along had a troubled preview period, opened to tepid reviews, and closed after 16 performances. Prince decided that he needed to work with other writers, and Sondheim, stung by the theater community glee that greeted his failure, briefly considered giving up the theater to write mystery novels. Instead, he was introduced to playwright-director James Lapine, who in turn introduced Sondheim to the world of not-for-profit theater. The 6 musicals he has written since then, Sunday in the Park with George, Into the Woods, Assassins, Passion, The Frogs, and Roadshow, have all originated in off-Broadway or regional not-for-profit theaters, although all but one have eventually ended up on Broadway. This new venue for his plays freed Sondheim in some ways to be even more unconventional, push the story character structure envelope farther, tackle even unlikelier subject matter, presidential assassins, and challenge audiences even more. As unconventional as the Sondheim-Prince plays have been, they seem practically mainstream when compared to the audacious and startling Sunday in the Park with George. The first act fictionalizes the creation of pointless painter Georges Seurat's masterpiece, A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of Le Grand Jacques, imagining lives for Seurat and the figures in the painting, as well as meditating on the process of artistic creation, the nature and purpose of art, and how artists live. The second act moves 100 years into the future to focus on an American artist, another George, possibly descended from Seurat, and his struggle to create art and connect with others in an age when all possibilities for artistic and personal expression seem to have been exhausted. In the end, Sunday in the Park is as intentionally thoughtless as company. Sondheim and Lapine have created, on stage, a metaphorical canvas on which can be depicted an exploration of ideas about the relationship between art and the world. The play problematizes this relationship, complicating the process of representation by which the world is turned into art, and conflating art and the world, exploring in various ways how art becomes something of a substitute for the world in our minds, how our understandings of the time-bound protean world are always already aestheticized, and how the messy social world affects the production, dissemination, consumption, and reception of art. The play's characters are simultaneously the figures in Seurat's painting and the people with pasts and anticipated futures on whom they were based. From the moment George invites us at the very beginning of the play to enter his blank canvas as he proceeds to create his painting, we realize that the figures, George, and we, the audience, are both inside and outside the painting. In the song Beautiful, George makes a significant claim about art and reality. Speaking to his mother, who views art as preserving an objectively knowable but receding reality, he offers, quote, "You watch while I revise the world." This idea of art is not imitating or reproducing the world, but revising, recreating it, is central to the play's presentation of art. Just as the figures are both inside and outside the painting, so is there a tension between the disorder of the characters' lives and the structure the painting provides. This is what art does. And this is most clearly why art is not a straightforward replication of the world. The world is random, fluid, entropic, chaotic. Art takes that world and gives it structure, order, and meaning. Art is a means of representation by which the unknowable is made at least contingently knowable. While developing these ideas about art and the world, the play is also interested in the artist and the role he plays in all this. The authors use George to reveal the difficulty of negotiating the interrelationship of art and the world. 2 songs in the first act concentrate on this negotiation. In one section of The Day Off, George sketches 2 dogs for the painting. In this process, however, he so identifies with the dogs as his subject that he imagines them speaking to him and each other. He creates background for what each of their lives is like, and he even joins them in sniffing around with the trash on the ground. Sondheim describes this as George's, quote, inhabiting, as Seurat did, the interior lives of the major figures in his painting. Later, in the same scene, however, George sings another song, Finishing the Hat, that reveals the loneliness he feels. Absorbed in his painting, he feels separated from others and feels keenly the disappointment that Dot, his mistress, doesn't understand the painting or his commitment to it. This separation from the world, paradoxically, is as necessary as immersion in the world for the creation of art. The artist needs to understand as much as possible the world he wants to depict, but in order to recreate this art, he also needs to maintain a critical distance. In many ways, the version of the world he's creating in his painting overlaps and supersedes the world outside the painting. After his last meeting with Dot, before she emigrates to the United States, George says to himself, quote, "Connect, George, connect." This statement is both an admission of his failure in his relationship with Dot, his inability to connect with her as a human being, and an assertion of the connection with his subject, a connection made through the artistic imagination that he employs as the painting takes its final shape. It's mid-July, 1983. You are one lucky theater goer. Because you have tickets to the most talked about but most mysterious show in New York right now, Sunday in the Park with George. Stephen Sondheim is working with a new partner, James Lapine, and in a new venue, the not-for-profit off-Broadway Playwrights Horizon Theater on 42nd Street. 2 long walks from where Whoopi premiered in 1928. Playwrights is presenting a workshop of this new, unfinished musical for subscribers only, in their tiny 150-seat theater. But many of the movers and shakers of the New York theater scene, including you, have managed to score tickets. You've heard that the show is pretty unconventional, and also that they're presenting only the first act, and an incomplete first act at that. You don't know, however, that temperamental star Mandy Patinkin has threatened to walk out because 2 of his first act songs have yet to be delivered. This morning, before rehearsal, Patinkin met with Sondheim and music director Paul Gemiani across the street from the theater at the West End Cafe, where Sondheim played his just completed Finishing the Hat. In it, George skims through his sketchbook, recalling snatches of songs connected with each of the figures, but then reflects on his departed lover, his loneliness, and his art. Patinkin was so moved by the song, he insisted on singing it in tonight's performance, with the lyrics pasted in his sketchbook. You are the first audience to hear it.
Mademoiselles, hear me, pal.
Second bottle.
She looks for me, bonnet flapping, yapping, whoop,
Chicken. Pastry. Yes, she looks for me. Good. Let her look for me to tell me why she left me, as I always knew she would. I had thought she understood. They had never understood, and no reason that they should. What if anybody could? Finishing the hat. How you have to finish the hat. How you watch the rest of the world from a window while you finish the hat. Mapping out a sky. What it feels like riding a sky. You feel the voices that come through the window go until they distance and die. Until there's nothing but sky. And how you're always turning back to right from the grass or the stick or the dog or the light. How the kind of woman willing to wait's not the kind that you want to find waiting to return you to the night. Is he from the height? Coming from the hat? Studying the hat? this one from that, studying a face, stepping back to look at a face, leaves a little space in the way, like a window, but to see is the only way to see. And when the woman that you want knows, you can say to yourself, well, I give what I give. But the woman that you knows that wherever you are, there's a part of you always standing by, mapping out the sky. Finishing a hat, starting on a hat, finishing a hat. I made a hat. Where there never was a hat. Do I have to answer questions?
Yes, you have to answer questions. I think there are a lot of, all over town, possibly future arts and sciences lecturers who are now thinking, well, thanks a lot.
Oh, I'd love to take questions. Yes.
We have some time for questions.
I know this wasn't about musicals and film, but I did read somewhere that critics felt that while West Side Story worked on the stage, when it got to film, it almost ruined like musicals and film just because it seemed so incongruous. These guys dancing in the street on film, etc. on the stage.
Well, I guess it depends on what kind of streets you hang out on, but a couple things. First of all, I mean, West Side Story is pretty successful on like one of 11 Academy Awards or something. I don't think it was terrible on film. I mean, it is very much the stage show film, which it has issues. I was talking about the whole problem, the idea of Rodgers and Hammerstein introducing the notion of realism, where when the characters break into song, we are able to suspend our disbelief. That's a little harder in film because film is such a realistic medium. So yeah, there's that problem. But one of the things that I love about the film of West Side Story is the opening. They extended the dance prologue. It's much longer in the film than it is on stage. And part of that was, if you watch it, it starts with the Jets in the playground, being tough and snapping their fingers and everything. And they walk, they strut. They're strutting, and it's only after that's established for quite a while that the first couple of dance moves get introduced. And I think what Jerome Robbins and Robert Wise have directed it, I think what they were trying to do was to make that transition into dancing seem natural. But it's hard. It's much harder on film. So yeah, I can sympathize. Look, I like the movie of West Side Story.
Do you suppose that the connected dots explicitly and implicitly in that show is a comment on entering the conversation of realism and expressionism, forming content because it's a formulist painting?
I think so, yeah. I mean, one of there's a scene where George shows the painting to an older artist who's kind of his mentor, and he says, well, these people are totally out of proportion. I mean, he doesn't get it. And he says, no, you've got to stand back here. He says, you can't be afraid to take it apart and put it back together again for yourself. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do, because, in the pointless painting, the colors aren't blended. Each dot is separate. The eye does the blending. So, I think that's one of the ways that he complicates the whole... The section in the book is much longer than what I read tonight, but he complicates the whole relationship between artist and viewer in terms of where the art comes from. So, I think so.
Wow, it was a wonderful talk. And, multimedia, I could never do this in 1 year.
I couldn't do it either. Laura Kareem did it. All I did was say, I kind of want something like this, and she came up with something.
Laura's awesome. But,
And she is.
I was struck by your account of the early musical and formulaic musical, as kind of brought postmodern. And I was wondering if you would extend that or not to other formulaic arts, and both of us are scholars of popular culture as well as of literary sorts. And I'm wondering if there's something about the formula itself that lends it a sort of postmodern quality, where you actually have a kind of knowing relationship to what's coming and what's coming before.
Well, that's very interesting, because I can think of a number of, the genre movies from the 30s, for example, the Western or the mystery, or like, adolescent series fiction, for example, which tend to be very formulaic. That's real interesting. Part of what I'm arguing about theater is that when the 70s came along and people like Sondheim and, he's not the only one by any means, people like Bob Fosse and Kander and Ebb and Michael Bennett are also doing these kinds of musicals, though they're not as good. Is that when they were interested in trying to do a postmodern turn for the musical theater, they had this ready vocabulary already for it. I'm imagining that you could, I'm not good on movies after 1950, but I imagine you could look at some of the movies in the 70s, like Robert Altman's Long Goodbye, and the way that he has the vocabulary, and then the twist he puts on it.
Absolutely. Or Point Blank.
Yeah. Good. Cool. I'm using my microphone. Anybody else? Yes. Oh, I kind of went back here than you. Yes.
This is a really nerdy question, but I feel like I'm in a safe place. So Into the Woods is one of my favorite musicals ever in the history of the world. And when I saw the movie, of course, I was very disappointed that they took out the whole part with the narrator, which was, I thought, a really cool postmodern element of that story. So I'm kind of wondering if you see musical theater kind of still being a part of this postmodern world, with Sondheim still publishing and still out there in the world, and revivals of his plays being out there, or if we're kind of going into, postmodern, like once, or if it's still kind of in that area.
I always seem to get in trouble when I use the word postmodern, so you set me up here. I do think that there's a way of looking at Sondheim's plays of the 90s and 2000s, and also plays at other, kind of the next generation, and actually the generation after that, of musical theater people are doing in the 21st century, that connect to my sense of the postmodern, which is working within a recognition that yes, indeed, we are immersed in an atmosphere of discourse, but given that, how do we still find a need to make a connection outside the language? Sondheim's his 1994 musical Passion and his 2004 musical The Frogs are very much about trying to escape language. I'm not sure how that connected to Into the Woods movie.
I felt like the changes in the movie kind of took away some of the modern elements.
Well, again, movies are a more realistic medium, and having the narrator interacting with the film audience in the same way that happens in the stage play would be awfully difficult to reproduce. What they did in the movie was something that Sondheim and Lapine, when they were working on Into the Woods originally, what they wanted to have happen is at the end it would be revealed that the narrator was the baker and the baker's wife's baby grown up, and that he is now passing on the story that was passed on to him. But they couldn't figure out a way to make it work. And in a way, that's kind of what they returned to in the movie, because the voiceover that we get doing what narration there is, there's not a lot of it, is indeed the baker. So I think they were kind of returning to an earlier idea for it. But yeah, it's I was disappointed that I miss The Mysterious Man. I know that not everybody likes The Mysterious Man, do they, Dr. Perry? I'm sorry, you had a question.
Yes. So with the resurgence in a number of new genre, jukebox musicals, could you you say that there's a return to that early convention from the 1920s where, as you would see, most of the songs were written by Cole Porter? The plot becomes less important, whereas the music, because it's written by, for example, with All Shook Up, you have Elvis Presley, the Route 66, I think Billy Joel, and all these other, Mamma Mia and ABBA, where the songs become important rather than the plot.
Right.
Do you think there's a resurgence coming around with that, or is it more like a revamped version that focuses more on the postmodern?
No, I think that what you're saying is very astute. Yeah, I think that the musicals like All Shook Up or Mamma Mia have a lot more in common with the aesthetics of the musical comedy than they do with the Rodgers and Hammerstein style musical. Except, of course, with the important exception that they don't have original scores. And that the audience is, going in here, the producers are counting on audiences wanting to hear music that they're already familiar with. So instead of coming out humming the tunes, you go in humming the tunes. I'm trying to think of a nice way to say this without, indicating how stupid I think these shows are. When I was talking about the Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals, I said what was once revolutionary becomes itself conventional. And there's a way I think that by the time you're getting to the late 90s, early 2000s, the kind of what I'm calling a postmodern musical, people like Stephen Sondheim, Bob Fosse, and Michael Bennett, is also becoming conventional, to the point where people are kind of able to do a very sort of simplistic or watered-down version of it, or throw in self-referential things just to get a laugh. Any guys see The Producers? Yeah, I know, right? There's a bit where, one of the characters goes down here and says, "Why did you move so far down stage right?" Well, it gets an easy laugh, but it doesn't have there's no content to it. It's not about anything. It's just an easy laugh. And I think that that's kind of what it's become for, when you see the elements of, what I think of as the elements of postmodernism in a lot of contemporary musicals, they're often there just for easy laughs or for convenience. So I don't need to be too pressing on it. Do you like toothbrush musicals? Am I being bad?
They're done well, and they're pretty good. Most of the time.
Sadly, that's true. I would agree with that. Yes? Good for you. Everyone should.
Are almost simplistic and and I would argue that some songs were, not that I agree with that at all, but I would argue that some songs were the language that he uses, the vocabulary he writes it, the themes that he deals with, to get to a much more you have to think about it, and he forces his audience to be smart, and I'm wondering, in a world where a lot of people will go to see a show to not have to think why that worked.
Well, it doesn't always. I mean, not very many of his shows have made money on Broadway. It goes to show. He tells a story that when West Side Story opened back in 1957, the second performance, he said, I finally got a show on Broadway. He went and stood at the back of the theater just to take in, hey, I've got a show on Broadway. And curtain comes up, da-da-da, and the Jets start snapping their fingers. Not 30 seconds in the show, some guy down front stands up, excuse me, and walks up to the aisle. And sometimes they're going, what? And he says, no, you don't want to know, it just leaves. And he said, all right. He said, in a way, I took that as a compliment because the show communicates so well in its opening seconds what it's about that this guy knew he wasn't going to like it. But, you're making a couple of really good points. And the one is that, in the typical formula for a musical play is 50% of the stage time is dialogue, 50% of it is music, singing and dancing. And that means that the book, the dialogue, which has to carry the bulk of the plot, has to be extremely compressed. And that sometimes lends itself to, the charge of being overly simplistic. Some of them are quite simplistic. That doesn't mean they're not enjoyable. I mean, not the same way that a straight play would, be able to develop its themes in depth more through the plot. In a musical theater, you have to rely on the music and dance to develop the themes, because there isn't time for the book to do it. The book just has to tell the plot. Sondheim is especially good at that, and not every composer is. And if again, I don't want to insult anybody's taste, but when you look at something like Jekyll and Hyde, well, let's just use Jekyll and Hyde as an example. No one looked really offended. The songs are basically pop ballads, and so the characters stand there and they sing cliches that aren't really too connected to the particularities of their character and aren't really connected to moving the plot very well. Okay, you've just lost 50% of your running time to blather, basically. So, whereas if you had songs that were actually doing something, well, then you'd have a chance to develop those ideas. Sondheim tells a story about when he was first did West Side Story and Gypsy. He was working with Arthur Lawrence, the great playwright and musical book writer. Lawrence took him to observe a lesson at the Actors Studio, where everybody was doing the method, and Sondheim sat there, and afterwards he says, why did you waste my time taking that? I thought that was pretty stupid. He says, because that's what actors are learning now. You need to know that. Because the actors who are going to be singing your songs, they're going to be looking, that's how they're going to try to dissect your songs, the way they were dissecting those scenes. And he says that was a great revelation to me. I realized that I have to think about subtext. I have to think about giving the actor something to play, something to do. The song has to be about something. So and other people do that. I mean, it's not like he's the only one. There are a lot of great songwriters out there, but there's some pretty ones. Does that help? Okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Uh-oh, mind trouble?
Could I ask for one more number?
That's very kind, but we played all the music we brought. I wasn't expecting an encore. No. So we're out. But thanks, that's very nice. Anyone else, or shall we call it quits? Oh, Mr. Kervin.
As you mentioned during your presentation, opening night in Oklahoma, there's a before and after delineation, but you're certainly not aware of it going in. Do you think that the transitions from, for example, in your 3 acts, musical comedy to Rodgers and Hammerstein to Sondheim, do you think they are more, you're able to sense that one of those ideas is coming more from the fact that they've stretched the existing convention as far as it can go? Or do you feel that they just kind of come out of nowhere and you can only be aware that the old was wearing thin in retrospect?
Oh, well, it's always easier in retrospect. Monday morning quarterbacking, all that. It's an excellent question. And I've got 2 answers. One is that by the time you're getting to the late 30s, early 1940s, there was a clear sense that musical comedy was just kind of, as you said, gone about as far as it would go. And different people were trying different things. I mean, you've got George Gershwin doing his folk opera, Porgy and Bess. You've got Moss Hart and Kurt Weill and Ira Gershwin doing Lady in the Dark, which is it's like half of it is like a real live play. And it's about this woman going to a psychiatrist, and then she starts telling the psychiatrist her dreams, and then the dreams become the musical number. They have these like long 20-minute musical numbers, acting out the dreams. The Pal Joey, which uses the nightclub to make the music diegetic, and so that's so there were different people were trying different things. But the thing that makes the Oklahoma such an obvious turning point is that it was so darn successful. I mean, it ran for years, and the touring company ran for 10 years. That's why the movie didn't come out until 1945. They didn't want the movie to come out until the touring company had finally closed. It changed everything. Almost overnight, if you weren't doing an integrated musical, what you were doing seemed hopelessly old-fashioned. So if they hadn't done Oklahoma, who knows, maybe one of these other kinds of methods of kind of getting past musical comedy conventions would have become popular. Who knows? I think with, it's much less obvious in the 1970s. What's obvious is that you've got a lot of the shows that are being done are indeed kind of very creakily conventional. And you also you start getting revivals from the musical comedy era. Things like Irene and No No Nadette are becoming very successful. And who would have thought, right? Plus, then you've got these shows like, I've mentioned Cabaret and the Man of La Mancha and Hair, and also things like Sweet Charity that are, starting to do what Sondheim and Prince do big time in the 70s, which is to kind of, let's repurpose some of those elements of the musical comedy era for, well, they weren't calling it a postmodern time then, but, from our point of view it was. So it's not as clear of a delineation, I don't think. Oklahoma is a big deal because, like anything in the Broadway theater world, it's got to be make money to change things. It's got to be successful. Does that help? One more? All right.
Share your love of Sondheim.
I know.
But not all of us are going to be around forever, neither is he. And I know you tend to study genre, if you will. Who's coming up?
That's a good question. There are a lot of composer lyricist teams that I'm interested in beyond Stephen Sondheim. As Mr. Sondheim celebrated his 85th birthday 2 days ago, and he gave an interview where he mostly just talked about how old he is. There was a surprise birthday party for him at his home Sunday night, and apparently the main quotable comment that came out of it was, "I can't believe I'm going to be 85." There's a generation of composers and musical theater artists that follow Sondheim. People like Janine Tesori, Jason Robert Brown, Adam Gettle, Michael John Machuza. Those are the ones that I'm thinking of. They used to be characterized as sons of Sondheim. Now he's lasted so long. Now we have grandsons of Sondheim. Lin-Manuel Miranda, Adam Guan. Adam Guan has written one of the best songs for a musical ever. It's called "I'll Be Here." Go home and listen to it. It's beautiful. Who else? Adam Guan, mentioned Janine Tesori. Michael Kitt and Brian Yorkie will already want to Pulitzer Prize for one of their musicals. There are a lot of interesting people doing interesting things. I'm not pessimistic. What I'm pessimistic about is that their work is not being, for the most part, their work is not being done successfully on Broadway. Joshua Smith, he's really good. It's being done, in nonprofit venues, which is, great, but they're not making any money at it, and who knows how long they can afford to do what they're doing. Thank you.
Never happened before, but here's a place where I ask all former distinguished lecturers to stand and be recognized, so I'll have to ask the rest of you. If our former Thank you all once again very much for coming, and please, we have refreshments, and I'm going to volunteer Dr. McLaughlin for some more questions, and please enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks very much for coming.